Aztec and the Inca I privileged, as I said, because they are what the Europeans met. And our mandate was to try to let things relate to one another, not just be completely separated. So the Aztec met the Spanish first of the two civilizations. Both the Aztec and the Inca were only the last 100 years. They were short. They were a capstone of their traditions, but they were not long-lived. They might have been if the Spanish hadn't come, but so we call them the Aztec. It was the Aztec Empire. The Aztec Empire was made up of three separate groups, and I'm not going to burden you with them. If you want to read the whole politics of it, everything starts with a T, and it's really annoying. The Mexica, so Mexico, Mexica, with an A, were really the people we're talking about when we say Aztec. We're often very lax about it. It would be, I don't know if there's an analogy in the rest of the world. Like, I guess in World War II, there were, the Germans and they were an alliance. And if you called them all, they still, Axis, thank you. They still had their individuals. So America is not just the Axis. They're not synonymous. One is a group with three, and one is the individual. The individual group that dominated the Aztec Empire was the Mexica. Those were the people who lived in the city of Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan is the capital city. That's exactly underneath Mexico City. There's a whole city under there, but Tenochtitlan. The CH is like, it should have been an X, but it's gotten spelled CH, Tenochtitlan. So if you want to be precise, but what they read will usually say Aztec. So you might not, oh, there it is up on the screen. So I picked the Templo Mayor, that's Spanish for main temple, of course, and there's the building itself, and there's an Olmec-style mask that was buried in it. So the Olmec are really much earlier, and I'll go over them. That was a way to get some earlier people in besides the Maya, because the Maya and Yaxchilan really has nothing to do with the Aztec. Don't let them confuse the two. The Aztec were, if it's the last 100 years, or maybe they were beginning in 12th or 1300s, but when they had control and they were important, it was very late, but in the 1400s. The Maya were still in existence, but they had collapsed as of their classic civilization around 900. They stopped doing those kind of monuments like Lady Shock's stuff. They stopped making their pyramids, their hieroglyphics kind of go.
What are the general theories for why that happened, like why the collapse occurred?
There are a lot. One of them is getting out of balance with the environment. If you're too successful and the corn feeds a lot of people and they have a lot of babies, and then you have limited amount of and it was milpas, which are these small fields. They have to be intensively grown, and then if you don't, give them time off, then nitrogen and all that. You don't have room. You have too many mouths to feed, and so there's that. That's probably the main one. I would say if you needed to just give a, but again, I wouldn't start talking about the Maya with the collapse because, the Maya began in a very vestigial form 2,000 years BCE in little tiny villages and stuff. So, but the classic period is 250 to 900 AD, CE. Whichever, do you all use AD or CE? CE, okay.
So geographically speaking, though, and this is where my lack of knowledge comes in, but where Aztec Maya are located?
Maya over at the east, the Yucatan Peninsula, last bit of Chiapas, El Salvador, Belize, and a teeny bit of western Honduras. That's the Maya. And the Aztec are central Mexico, right where Mexico City is.
The Mayans a little north of the Aztecs as well.
Well, the Yucatan goes up higher, But the Aztec conquered most of the bend, and very important in the conquest, La Malinche, if you've heard about her, the woman who was the translator for Cortez and his lover, and then had his, Doña Marina. She was a Maya. Yeah, very important. She was not an Aztec woman who betrayed her people to the Spanish. She had been, she was a Maya slave. The Aztec had taken her as a slave. She was pissed off at the Aztecs. And so she said, sure, I'll help you. And she spoke Nahuatl, their language, Nahuatl, and she spoke Maya. So, Nahuatl. When there's an L, you kind of swallow it. Nahuatl. Like that. Nahuatl.
What was that other name that you called Malinche?
La Malinche. La Malinche is another term for her. And I don't know the exact translation of Malinche, but mal is bad. So it's sort of like I think it's like the betrayer. So that's really important. It's a complicated world there. So the Maya are still in existence. They're just not very fancy. They're not all organized in their city-states. They've gotten kind of villagey at that point. Okay. Our great friend, the calendar stone, and the Coyolxauhqui stone. Coyolxauhqui. Coyolxauhqui. If they look like these really long words, but if you just say them out Spanishy with the X as an SH, you'll get it. The H doesn't do anything. An H in Spanish doesn't do much. Coyolxauhqui. One way to teach the Aztec images, you can do a history, and you can show the feather headdress. I'll tell you why you would do it that way. Then you can do the whole city with the different offerings and the pieces. You can do the Olmecs that come first with that mask and say this mask represents these earlier people, if you want to be chronological for helping them. And then the Aztecs in this way. You know, you choose. You can read that later. The Mexica, this is the history. The history of the Mexica is really interesting. There are various books. A guy named Davies, D-A-V-I-E-S, he's got a book called The Aztecs. Most any of the good books on them, Richard Townsend has a good book on the Aztecs. And a woman named Inga Clendinen has a good book on the Aztecs. And any one of these will give you the Clendinen. And these kinds of references are all in my guides. You know, say read this, read that, read this if you want to. They're basically upstarts. They are people outside of what was considered fancy civilization around the lake, Lake Texcoco, where Mexico City used to be on top of a lake, you know, and it's all gone now. They came from some place called Aztlan, which is kind of like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Aztlan. From somewhere in the Northwest, so where there's more desert. They were just a band of people. They went past, this is their version of their history, which isn't particularly true, although we do think they came from the Northwest. They went to a place called Snake Mountain, Coatepec. Coat is snake in Nahuatl. And that's where the Coyolxauhqui stone story comes from, is what happened at Snake Mountain on their way to their final destination in the civilized Valley of Mexico, where they were then divinely going to take over, which of course it was all rewriting their history. There's a prophecy by their main god, Huitzilopochtli. We don't have any images of him, so you don't have to worry. You can just say the patron god if you want to. The prophecy was that they would see an eagle sitting on a cactus. Now the point of that is it's a prickly pear cactus. The fruits look like red hearts. And they bleed. Yeah. And people eat nopales. It's a place that's fertile where you have food to eat because nopales are edible and so are the fruits. But they bleed red juice like a pomegranate. So it looks like an eagle is eating a heart, and that is their sense of themselves. We're the eagles, and we're going to conquer. We're going to eat everybody's heart here. So that was their myth, that was why they landed where they did, which was on an artificial, they made an artificial island in the middle of the lake. They didn't do that because they wanted to. They were pushed into the middle of the lake because they committed crimes that they were punished for by the other civilized people who'd been there for a long time. And I'm using civilized, like, from their point of view. They, it's a gory kind of a story, but the lake, people say, how could they make an artificial island in the middle of a lake? Well, it's not 600 feet deep like Lake Titicaca. It's a sludgy swamp. It was sludgy, swampy, 6 or 8 feet deep maybe. And they just gathered up a bunch of all the goo and stuff like that, and they made a little island to live on. They did. They were very plucky. They were very plucky people. They kept being, that song, I get knocked down, but I get up again. They were always doing that. But the reason they got kicked into the middle of the lake was that they had risen up by being mercenaries enough to marry one of the daughters of one of the fancy other people. But they thought they would use her as one of their sacrificial victims instead. And they killed her, and they took her skin off. They flayed her. And a priest wore her skin, and they invited her dad to a party, and he saw his daughter's skin on. And that was one of the Mexica rituals. It was considered very, very good to be that.
They thought this was honor.
You were representing corn. What you're representing is that, the kernels of corn, that then they have a husk. And when you bury them, then the husk comes off, and then you grow more corn. The other person's skin is that husk, and the priests would wear it till it rotted off. Very smelly. And, this is gross to us, and it was gross to the other people in the area, but it was a miscommunication in some ways.
So they invited the father to say, oh, look how we've honored your daughter.
Yes.
And he's like,
I don't like that. No. So that's where the Mexica versus the Aztec. The other people, like her father, would be in the Aztec Empire, and the Mexica then are not part of it yet. They haven't risen up. Finally, they rise up, and they are one of the three. It's a complicated history that you don't have to go into, but they basically play one side against the other, and they win. And then they take over, the Mexica. And they become the dominant one of the three. So you'd think after having been shoved into the middle of the swamp